Hello, everybody. We are back in another panel, and this time for Inside Turkey Journal and its latest issue, published just 1 month ago, which was focused especially on the technopolar world that it is emerging lately. And we had a previous panel about this, focusing on Turkey's role and its emerging technologies and emerging policies within the technopolar world. However, right now we are here in our second panel focusing in a more general perspective on the global major actors, including here U.S., China, and their policies and their position within the technopolar world. I'm very excited today because we have three well-distinguished professors here with us, and it was a little bit hard to bring all of them together because like they are right now in three different continents, to tell the truth. However, I'm so glad to have all of them here with us. We have Professor Liu, who is joining us from Tongji University from China. And he's a distinguished professor and focuses especially on the U.S. And China global rivalry, especially in terms of technology. The second here with us is Professor Chandler, who works on drone warfare mainly, but also focuses on the emerging technologies, especially in AI, and has a wonderful background, to tell the truth, in this area. And our last speaker will be Professor Farquhar, who is a member of University of Derby, but also has, as we talked a little bit earlier, a lot of other positions. And one of them is also within the UN. And I'm very glad to all have you three here today with me. Without losing some time, I know that Professor Liu has a flight to catch soon after the panel, so I would like to start with him, and he is going to present us the paper that he wrote for Inside Turkey, which was focused on the US and China technological rivalry. Professor Liu, thank you for being with us here today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Glorious, and thank you very much for organizing this interesting discussions. It's my first time to join the authors panel. You combined the authors to discuss the same topics. I think that is very interesting and very insightful. So today I want to present some of my thinkings of the articles I've been published on the journals. So the topic is digital geopolitics and China-US competitions. So we always talking about the China-US decoupling or strategic competitions, and people said that technology is just part of the China-US relationships among with other topics, so that it has been influenced by the strategic competitions. But as the people who study the technologies, I believe that the technology not just influenced by the bilateral relations or structural relationships, but also have some power to shift the big picture of the China-US relations, because we are talking about the technology we're talking today is not like the nuclear, not like the biochemical weapons. It's actually the digital technologies, which is created by the human beings. It's virtual, right? It's not something existing physically. And also, for example, like the artificial intelligence is something not, it's still evolving, right? The tech competition between China and the United States started, like 2020s. At that moment, the AIGC are not being, popular, or even still in the laboratories. So, and I think also the quantum, the same things, and also the other, AI uh, are still, in the way on the way of the innovations. So, I think it's important to define the technology, right? So, I will share some of my thinking of the concept. So the technology is actually are like it's combined as a digital space, right? So the state are just like other stakeholders, not just China, U.S., and other countries, but also the peoples and the business are relatively new to this, new space. So that create a lot of the suspicious anxieties and distrust and mistrust issues because we're just um, living in this uncreated atmospheres that we like to we can explain it is on ontologies, right? So um, so this is if I think that the data, the algorithm, the ICT infrastructure, and computing powers are they consist the new digital space that is it's a general purpose technologies also because everybody is using data, created data. No, our daily life are highly relied on this digital geographic environment, not just country, but also all the industries, all the domains, and so. But the problem is it also create the digital strategies or global rivalries, competitions on these issues like the data algorithm, infrastructure, and the computing powers. So this gives us a full picture. I try to use this to explain the state, the behavior between China and the U.S. Right? We can talk all this issue individually, right? We can talk about the data security issue between China and US, and also we can talk about the algorithm like the TikTok, and also talk about the infrastructure like Huawei 5G. So what I want to do is I try to use a unified framework to explain the competition between China and US, but not the typical uh, technology, right? I want to specify that digital technology, but a unified framework. That's what I want to explain in these articles. So then the second part I want to explain how this technology, digital technology shift the geopolitical competition between China and the US. So the history could be studied from the Snowden case. So before that, China and US really have a good moment for the corporations, but we cooperate. We have a lot of corporations, and because they are structural, complementary. The Snowden case changed the Chinese perception about cybersecurity, and also the Huawei case, changed our understanding of the U.S. intentions in the digital space. So you see that the U.S. has the small yard, high fence, and containment in all these different domains. I'm not going to explain that in the details, but you can see that a lot of the policies and effort have been done by the U.S. government trying to sanction or export controls or competing with China. And what the Chinese response, I think that is openness and autonomous response logics. So the decoupling, let me be clear, decoupling is not the fact. Decoupling is the U.S. strategy. Chinese government do not want decoupling, right? Uh, and China want to still work with the U.S. companies and also the global markets. So we emphasize the sovereignty, but we still want to open our market. We still want to work together with um, our counterpart previously. But we also emphasize of the indigenous innovations because because of the export controls, we cannot buy the advanced chips from the United States and other important valuable part. So we have to do this, but this is not uh, the intention of the decoupling, right? It's just you don't have a choice, and the good thing for China is that most of those products the U.S. do not sell with the China are very valuable, right? They with high value, so it helps the Chinese government to invest and the Chinese company to invest because they know this is a good chance to move up to the global supply chain. Previously, with the global supply chain system, most of the Chinese companies are just at the lower valuable part of the, but this also it's created the some kind of the crisis to our industry, but also brought a lot of the opportunities for the domestic companies. So this and the AI as a special examples that we see that the US is more like adapt the large models, large computing powers, big data, because you have the money, you have the platforms, you have the computing power, the advanced chips. The thing to China is China do not have that much money because the U.S. government limited the U.S. capital market investment in China, right? And also, we don't have the computing power because we cannot get the most advanced NVIDIA chips, and also the Chinese language, just compared with the English language, we just know very limited data. So, but we create our own ways. It's open source and small models, small computing powers. So. So now you see that there's a different strategies, and also you see that the digital technologies, do have some constraints of the state behavior or state approaches, right? So that's the reason why under such severe, containment, China still can develop its own models. Technology, generally speaking, are still move ahead. So that is because of the logic of the technology is different with the traditional technology. So, but we do need to cooperate, right? As I said, that China do not want to decouple with the United States, and also the technology, needs China and the U.S. to cooperate. So the market, the global governance, and also showed us that we need to find the common ground to cooperate in the future. And last part I want to discuss is the impact to global ecosystem. Generally speaking, I don't think that the competition between China and the U.S. will lead a balkanization of the global tech ecosystem or a split of the ecosystem, because the government cannot control everything. To be specific, the government from China and the U.S. have to heavily relied on the private sectors, right? And the tech companies in the United States or tech company in China, most of them are not state-owned companies. They're really a private and globalized companies. So that give the power of the corporate and the market. They want to cooperate with each other. They like competitions, but also they don't want government to involve too much. And also the open source ecosystem played important roles, right? There's a lot of the corporations in these areas from the tech communities, and also the academic exchange are important, and it still have. I personally involved a lot of the track 2 dialogues between China and the US on the AI issues. So you say that the government cannot stop the exchange of the information and the knowledge. It may have some problems, but generally speaking, they cannot stop. And also, the raising of the global security risk need China and the U.S. to cooperate, and also the constraints and the variables shaping the futures. So we have some kind of the effect to fragment the pace, but also the open cooperation phase. So the last conclusions. So I think that digital geopolitics is reshaping the global order and turning digital space into a new arena for the major power rivalry. China-US competition over data, algorithm, computing power, and infrastructure reflect the extension of the traditional geostrategic logic into the digital age. Yet, the openness of the technology, interdependence of the supply chain, and the collaborative nature of the innovation makes the complete decoupling unrealistic and undesirable. The future will hint on the balanced rivalry with the cooperation fostering openness and inclusive government to avoid the tech cold war. So that is something I want to share. I think I'm on time constraint. Thank you very much, Gloria. You're muted.
Thank you. I'm sorry for this, and thank you very much for this presentation. And you've been like perfectly with the timing as well. And I need to mention that it was like you stated all of the most important issues also that you mentioned in the article. And I was very like when I was reading the article for the first time, it also like brought to me some other perspectives that maybe I have not thought about previously, to tell the truth. So I'm very glad that we had also the opportunity to share this here as well. Professor, I'm going to continue with Professor Chandler right now. So it is up to you whether you want to continue with us or if you have to leave. Thank you very much for joining us today here. It was a pleasure for us to have you here. And now we are going to continue with our second speaker, with Professor Kate Chandler. While we were talking with her about the possible commentary that she can write for the journal, we were discussing maybe that she can present a paper on the American perspective of this emerging technopolar order. And then she came to me with a whole other idea in terms of data and the supply chains. And I was like, this is perfect. We should include something like this in our issue. And I'm very glad that we did so, because I really enjoyed her article, her commentary. And I'm glad that she is going to share her points of view with us here today. The floor is yours, Professor.
Thanks so much. And I want to thank the other members of the panel. It's really exciting to be sharing with you. And I think Professor Liu set up some of the commentary that I want to make in a really effective way. I'm focusing just on one aspect of how artificial intelligence is made, the data aspect. But I think a lot of the discourse, especially in certain realms of international relations, really focuses on a kind of rivalry, this technopolar order that you describe, the sort of differences between or competition between China and the United States. And I think what Professor Liu just pointed out is that that is one specific lens into how we can think about artificial intelligence. And I think it's really important that we complicate how that's happening, even as we acknowledge that this is sort of what the governments are currently doing, and particularly the government in the United States. So one of the things I'm really interested in is, what does it mean for a technology to actually be global? What does it mean for artificial intelligence to actually reproduce intelligence? And a question that I've long been interested in is what kinds of ideas about the human and about the intelligence are baked into these systems that really ignore lots of other ways of thinking about what intelligence could be and what, thinking actually means. And so thinking about data for me is one of the ways that we can see both the tremendous possibilities that are encapsulated by artificial intelligence, but also the ways that artificial intelligence is only one kind of intelligence. And I hope to really think about the ways in which we also need other forms of intelligence, and particularly critical thinking about what knowledge is, how these technologies are used. And I really want to underline the sort of continued ongoing human aspect of these technologies, the ways in which there are so many people involved in the production of artificial intelligence across the globe, and their various different interdependent relationships. And Professor Liu sort of touched on some of the ways in which the U.S. export controls have tried to limit the export of chips to China. They have, really attempted to build a wall and to contain the technologies. But when we look at the impacts of what has happened, as he described, right, people find ways of working around these export controls, and the global supply chain continues to be global, and it's hard for one nation to actually control even the basic hardware that's necessary to make artificial intelligence. And I think when we start talking about data, it becomes even more complicated. So at the current moment in the United States, the major artificial intelligence companies are really talking about how they want to control data, how they want to have access to all of the world's data, how they want to build giant data banks, how control over data is basically controlling the future of artificial intelligence. And I think when we really begin to think about what could that possibly mean in a global context, it becomes really hard to imagine how this would be possible for a single company or a single nation. And I think it really illustrates the ways in which, if artificial intelligence is actually to be intelligent, it will require global cooperation and engagement of all kinds of people all across the world. There are thousands of languages spoken by thousands of people across the globe. And currently, artificial intelligence only performs really well in English. And there's over 100 languages that Google currently says it can do artificial intelligence in, but that's still a fraction of what the world's languages actually are. Much of the world's intelligence is not actually even written down. It's not on the internet. So it does not have access to these aspects of intelligence. And I really want to see more discussion of all of the ways in which there are so many ways that humans are engaging and interacting across the globe that are not captured digitally, that are not captured online, and so obviously cannot be captured through artificial intelligence. So one of my reference points is Borges' parable about mapping. And this was written, just after World War II. It talks about colonialism, but it's also a critique of colonialism, and it's sort of indicative of what is about to become the post-colonial moment. And he describes, you know, a society that becomes so obsessed with the idea of mapping that they devote all of their resources to building an exact replica of a one-to-one map of the territories that they're trying to control. And in so doing, basically, you know, lead to the ruin of this particular empire. And I think it's really important for us to think about the ways in which the obsession over capturing data and information and trying to control it can ultimately be counterproductive and a failure. So knowledge is something that is generated collectively and communally and shared. And certainly the idea of like universal intelligences, it cannot be controlled by a single nation or a single group. And so thinking about data in this global context really challenges us to think about the limitations of this kind of technopolar order where we're describing artificial intelligence in terms of the nation state and failing to think about all the ways in which artificial intelligence is necessarily going to interact with all kinds of other aspects that can't be captured by that relationship. So that's something that's really important to me. The other aspect that I talked a lot to Gloria about and I'm really concerned about is this question of labor and work. So when we talk about artificial intelligence, it often seems as though it's some kind of like magical system that, you know, produces outputs based upon algorithms. And what that ignores is the enormous amount of labor that has gone into organizing data and into training the data. And much of that work is not being done either in the United States or in China. It is being done by laborers throughout the global South. So there are workers across the globe at this moment that are subcontractors for AI companies that are doing the work of carefully labeling the data in order to be able to make these models function. And they are the ones who are also evaluating these outputs. So again, this story about who is involved in the development of artificial intelligence really is leaving out some of the really important work that is being done. The data is not just collected and then sent into an algorithm. The data has to be organized, cleaned. It has to be prepared in order for the algorithm to use it. And then it has to be tested and evaluated. And all of that is work that is currently being done by millions of people. And it's a huge industry. Currently, the estimates are something around $17 billion is being spent on this. So lots and lots of money, lots and lots of investment are going into these processes. And I think we need to more carefully consider all of the ways in which this work and this data is part of how we are developing artificial intelligence and part of how it's going to play out in a global context, and who has a stake in its use and who should be able to talk about how it is used and what kind of limits we should have, what kind of controls we have. The final part that I wanted to emphasize from Professor Liu's presentation is that these systems are going to be used across the globe, right? So again, they're not digital tools, quickly can be used and taken up in all kinds of different contexts, all kinds of different situations. Rules that are established only by the European Union or only by the United States or only by the China are going to be necessarily limited. And we really need to have a better way of having a global conversation about how we are going to use artificial intelligence, what kind of limits we want to place on it, and what kind of concerns we have about how these tools are being used. I think I'm close to time, Gloria. I may be a little short. Do you want me to keep going? I would love to have a conversation at the end. So
maybe we can touch just in 1 or 2 minutes the issue with the map that you showed that can lead also us to the flows of the artificial intelligence. So it would fit perfectly also, I guess, with the presentation of Professor Farquhar.
Great. That would be great. Thanks so much. So one final part of my commentary, which I encourage you all to read, is I asked ChatGPT to think about current conflicts in the Western Sahel. And I, as a scholar in the School of Foreign Service and someone who has worked on drone warfare and conflict, I was really interested in what kind of information ChatGPT would give me about a conflict where there isn't a lot of information. There is a lot of competing narratives. There is, the area represents hundreds of linguistic groups. It's a very, very complex region. There's lots of different nations. There's lots of different ethnic groups represented. And so I asked ChatGPT to sort of summarize for me the conflict and to indicate where it thought a future attack might occur. And ChatGPT also prompted me to make a map out of this using its new mapping technologies. So one of the things that I immediately observed is because large language models rely on existing data in order to understand contemporary problems, the interpretations that it gave me of what was happening in the Western Sahel really relied on discourse about Islamic radicalism that have existed over the past 20 years. And there is, of course, a component of this that is part of the conflict in the Western Sahel, but it ignored lots of other issues that could have been also and are also reasons why these conflicts are happening, including things like climate change, ongoing issues of local relationships. It framed everything from a lens of the U.S. And this really came out, particularly in the map that it made for me, because when I asked it about future areas where there might be an attack or where an attack might occur, it took the western part of Africa and it inserted Cuba onto the map of Africa. And the only explanation I can give for this, it's totally shocking. And also because there is so much discourse of future attacks in Cuba in the existing, thousands and thousands of English papers on what might happen associated with terrorism and, conflicts, that was its interpretation of what was going to be. And it made the Cuba that it put in Western Africa bright red colored, so I would know that it would be there. To be clear, it did not say Cuba in any of its output that it provided to me as text. This was only when we introduced visual information. But it was just, it looked like I had received this sort of Cold War image. And again, to come back to Professor Liu's point, right, we don't want to repeat a Cold War. And again, when you're working from existing data, and that is how you are trying to interpret all of the contemporary conflicts, obviously that becomes a lens in which the systems are trying to interpret things. And so those of us who are working to rethink what is happening, to try to consider more complex global relationships, to consider a world that is not dominated only by two superpowers, right? Which has always been the case in my view. Those are not the dominant narratives, and those aren't the ones that are given to us by AI tools. And so I think there's really important limitations here in terms of, just our critical capacity to understand. And if we are taking these outputs as given, they are not going to be useful in terms of, not just understanding a conflict, but also trying to resolve and to address it. So.
Thank you very much, Kate. I really appreciate it. And as also you mentioned, like, I urge all of our readers to have a look at the commentary, because it brings quite a lot of different perspectives to you as well. Like the discussions on AI are dominated by this competition between the U.S. and China, but there are a lot of other issues that we need to look into because, like, they are the real actors or factors, let's say, shaping the technological development right now. I will pass to our last speaker, Professor Facuara. And by the way, I'm very glad because like I realized that we are 3 females in this panel, and it's something that does not happen quite often, especially for us, let's say, and I'm very glad to be here. So Dolapo, I think where Professor Chandler left, it would be like perfect for you to proceed with what you discussed in your commentary about the biases of AI and in terms of the intercommunity communications as well. So like the floor is yours, and I'm looking forward to hear your comments as well.
Thank you very much, Gloria, and thank you, Professor Liu, who is left, and Professor Chandler. I'll probably be the devil's advocate here, and I'll probably say perhaps one of the issues is the gap and the intercultural communication dynamics between the U.S. and China, which we come through in my paper. I also would like to start by saying that AI thrives on data availability. And so where there's no data, it hallucinates, it tries to make up information. And this is where the danger lies. I'm writing a couple of modules or courses for the EU on responsible AI adoption, and teaching it to corporate sector, but also in the public sector. I'm also part of a research accelerated environment in the UK, where we're looking at how AI can be adopted in the public sector to enhance performance. So there's no doubt technologies in general and AI specifically, they've all significantly transformed the way we communicate. It's because of technology that we can all communicate today. So we are all fans of technology. It has enhanced efficiency, personalization, accessibility, but it has also introduced challenges and authenticity issue, privacy, and social interaction dynamics. And those are on the page 59 of my paper. But when you try to examine this through the lens of technopolitics, AI and technologies in general are all reshaping intercultural communications by automating translation, enabling real-time cross-linguistic interaction, personalizing content, mediating social and political narratives. These technologies are not neutral. They reflect the values, the priorities, and the biases of culture and institutions that create and deploy them. So if the major powers, like Professor Liu said, and Professor Chandler have rightly alluded to, China and US, these are not the two dual cultures shaping the world that dominate the global scene or the global world. And so when you relate communication to technopolitics, you look at politics being embedded in technology. You look at the hybrid power, which produces hybrid forms of power by combining cultural, institutional, and technological elements, influencing how power is exerted and contested. So there's no surprise there between the tussle between US and China about who dominates what, who manages the market or the global market of AI or the chip that produces technology. But it is also the social movement, the use of internet, digital tools that are connected, that are connected by communities to organize and to mobilize for social and political change. And it's on this observation or backdrop that I think my paper, AI Technologies in Intercultural Communications, whether it offered opportunities or consequences. I explored the dual impact of AI technologies on intercultural communication by highlighting both the opportunities and challenges. I also examined how AI tools like machine learning, natural language processing, and translation systems facilitate communication across cultural barriers, while also introducing social consequences such as biases, inequality, and loss of cultural nuance. And that cultural nuance is quite important. I like that slightly further when I give an example of the United Nations conference. But one of the things when you link intercultural communications into technopolitics, again, AI becomes a soft power tool that influences global discourses, cultural representation, and public opinion. It is also that technological hegemony which may emerge where dominant nations or companies that shape AI development in ways that prioritize their linguistics, ethical, and political norms. After all, AI will only do what is programmed or trained to do, and it's so as intelligent as the people programming and training it. So, like Professor Chandler said, what about all those intelligence and information that are not documented on the internet or they are communicated through other means? After all, internet, written communication are not the only forms of communication we have. There's also the control over data and algorithm that becomes a political act in itself, affecting how cultures are represented and how communication between them is filtered and facilitated. And when we understand this, I felt it would be appropriate to actually then ask two questions. How can AI technologies the usage of AI technologies facilitate intercultural communication? It's important to understand how it does that, but also to understand whether AI usage results in more consequences than opportunities. And so through this, I tried to come up with different analyses and deductions, and I realized that, yes, there are opportunities. AI enhances real-time communication, language translation, and cultural preservation, making intercultural dialogue more accessible. It can digitalize and endanger languages and promote inclusivity. So UNESCO, for example, is funding a number of projects around intangible heritage and how this can be digitalized and communicated so they don't go into extinction. These are good things. These are opportunities that technology and AI offer us in the world. And there's no denying that. But there are also social consequences. But before I get into that, the challenges like how AI systems often carry algorithm biases, how it reinforces stereotypes, because that's the data, the sources in which it can draw information from, how it's marginalizing non-dominant cultures. We've often talked about how AI is not inclusive and how it's eroding cultural nuances. Issues like discriminatory recruitment algorithm is one thing that Google itself have been accused of. There's biased content moderation, and there's that digital divide that are exacerbated through inequalities globally. The social consequences of all this is that AI impacts labor market. And I think Professor Chandler slightly referred to that. It's also the political engagement and the trust in digital platform. Examples include racial bias in facial recognition, caste-based discrimination in credit scoring, and also unequal access to digital services. Now, let me quickly go or give an example of nuances and how this can actually become an issue. So a real-time AI translation in the United Nations conferences is a good example. The UN operates a multilingual environment. You have Arabic, Chinese, French, English, Russian, Spanish, all require real-time interpretation to facilitate diplomacy among member states. What we're now seeing in recent years is that AI-powered translation tools have been trialed to support human interpreters and reduce the burden on simultaneous translation. That's a good thing. Those are opportunities. And when in action, okay, these AI tools, they can be very good with real-time speech-to-text and neutral machine translation system. These are powered by Google. These are powered by Microsoft Azure Translator. They are good. The good thing about it is it increases the speed, it reduces the cost, and offers support for less commonly spoken languages during informal and lower level meetings. There are positives okay, is the multilingualism that it offers in meetings where interpreters are not available. Is the efficiency in terms of the speed of documenting and generating post-meeting transcripts across languages. The challenges and risk, however, and this is where it gets interesting, is the cultural misinterpretation or misrepresentation. And there's no surprise there. So AI translation often miss idiomatic expression, diplomatic tone, or nuanced terms, leading to diplomatic misunderstanding. How do we get on in life if that continues to happen? Isn't that in itself a major cause for friction and misunderstanding? So, for example, the dependence on English-centric data. This is a major issue for cultures where honorifics in Japanese language, for example, and context-driven phrases in Arabic are poorly handled. So, in Japan, there are some suffixes and salutation that are polite. They are used for social rank, age, intimacy, influencing how people speak in various situations. These are lost in translation. So I've used that as an example to highlight in the intercultural context, in the global context, if we're going to continue to work together with the development and the management and the deployment of AI, if there are possibilities of this even happening or occurring in our communication, that poses a greater risk, a significant amount of risk. Diplomatic consequences, for example, when you have a multilingual African Union session, you can almost imagine how that would go. An AI translated document subtly altered the tone of a climate agreement clause, making it sound more assertive in English than in French. And this led to diplomatic confusion that required human retranslation to restore nuisance. So maybe that's a good news for people who think AI and machines will overtake them or take their job. But the lessons from this is that AI translation is a powerful diplomatic aid, no doubt about that. But in terms of human oversight, it is very important, especially in high-stakes, cultural sensitive contexts. Real-time AI should be used as a supplementary, not a substitute. And this is why I am very, very, very engaged and interested in this conversation on how AI is designed, how it is deployed, how it is adopted, how it is integrated in any sector for any usage, because it has that tendency for bias and unfairness that can lead to discrimination. So not a substitute, especially in intercultural diplomacy, and of course, not a substitute in intercultural dialogue and communication. So what my paper tried to do is look at different theoretical frameworks like social constructivism, critical race theory, technological determinism, communication accommodation theory to explain all the societal impacts of AI technologies. These offer opportunities for future research where we can look at the intersectionality in algorithm biases and cultural sensitivity in AI design. Of course, emotional intelligence is another thing in AI system and policy implications for global governance. I concluded by highlighting that while AI technologies offer transformative opportunities, their usage in intercultural communication must be approached cautiously to mitigate any adverse effect and ensure that inclusivity is a diverse and to ensure inclusivity in a diverse and digital world, because that's what we have ended up with. I think it's a good thing that we have this digital world where everybody's connected, but it's also important to make sure that no one is left behind. AI seems to speak to the people with the technology infrastructure. What about the people without it? And how does that affect or impact on anything? So it is important to understand the significant opportunity that we're seeing here with the use of AI and the era of AI in terms of how it can enhance intercultural communication, but they can also come with substantial and subtle social consequences that must be carefully considered. Some key consideration is, what are the dual effects of AI in intercultural communication? What are the algorithmic biases and inequalities that can be generated from data? I have a sister that is in the public health in the States, and we interact back and forth in terms of how they shape public health policy to ensure that it doesn't end up, when they're using AI, it doesn't end up discriminating and, making more people, making it more inclusive, rather than less inclusive. This perpetuates discrimination in areas like employment, law enforcement, and welfare services. And this is one of the reasons why more and more people should be engaged in this conversation. The digital divide cannot be ignored. We have digital transformation that has increased connectivity, but also exacerbated inequalities between regions and social groups, with wealthier nations and individual benefits. So what am I saying as I conclude? We need to look at a whole range of things: loss of trust that this can present in the digital platform, impact on cultural identity, need for responsible development, and of course, the research opportunity that this offers. And this is what excites as a researcher also. Overall, I am advocating for cautious adoption of AI technologies, especially in intercultural communication and digital diplomacy, recognizing that their potentials while addressing the challenges to foster a more equitable and inclusive digital world. It is important. I am a fan of AI, and I think you can sense that from the way I talk, but also it is about the caution that we should tread in this, because we can only maximize the functionality and the impact and the benefits if we understand the limitation, so that we ensure that it doesn't do more harm than good. And that's why I am very much involved and excited, and I'm always committed to this conversation. Anywhere that is to inform policy, I am onto it. Anywhere to design programs, I am onto it, because this is where we can learn by doing it. And I continuously learn with my more and more engagements with AI. And I think this is where I'll stop talking about AI. And I leave the floor back to Professor Chandler and Gloria. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Fakwada. It was a very interesting presentation of your paper as well. And, like what I was thinking while all the professors were talking, like when we started with this issue, we started with the title Technopolar World, which at some point means some kind of divisions within the world as well, the international order. But like what we saw at the end of the art, like when the issue was published, and also as we can see here now, as you all spoke, we have like the global cooperation, which comes at the fore of everything. Like it comes at the end, like we need cooperation, and as Professor Chandler mentioned, not just between the state, but also between the people, between all the humans. Otherwise, like it would be a little bit difficult to keep up with what's going on in terms of the AI and the disadvantages or advantages as well that this new technology has on our lives and in our world as well. For the moment, I don't have any questions, but I don't know whether Professor Chandler has anything to add on this discussion.
One thing that I'm very concerned about, and I'd love to sort of have a moment to think about this as well, is that the dual use aspect of AI is increasingly coming to the fore. And I think dual use is also maybe too euphemistic to really convey the complexity of the problem that we're talking about. When people use this term dual use, they're talking about the ways in which technologies, and this is not a new problem with AI, it's a long-standing problem with technologies, can be used in civilian context and can be used in military context as well. One thing that I've really noticed in the United States in the past 2 years is there's been a substantial shift in terms of how even the AI companies are talking about their technologies. And longstanding commitments to not using artificial intelligence, at least explicitly for military purposes, are no longer in place. And so the technologies that we're talking about, you know, every single one of these systems, Microsoft Azure, ChatGPT, Meta's Llama system, all of these are also simultaneously, in ways that were not totally clear to the general public and to the American public either. We do know that they are being used and tested by the Department of Defense and the U.S. Homeland Security. And so I'm very worried about the ways in which systems that we thought were going to be used for intercultural communication, engagement, knowledge, other things, you know, potentially become tools to police migration status, potentially military tools. And in my work this summer in the United Nations, you know, I also think that the ways in which these are two different silos. So the group of people who are talking about regulations for artificial intelligence in the military are not communicating with the people who are talking about regulations for artificial intelligence in the civilian context. And I think increasingly we need to get these groups of people together and to you know, have a more open and frank conversation about the ways in which concerns about bias mean one thing. I mean, it's very concerning in any context. Mistranslating gender, for example, in a diplomatic context is, you know, it can be really troublesome. It can create diplomatic problems, but mistranslating gender in a military context can make someone a military target. And, you know, if we aren't acknowledging these problems, there's some really big issues. And so I think there are lots of great ways in which this technology can be used, but we really need to bring out the human side of it. And we need to also really talk about the ways in which these systems can be used in really beneficial ways, but that very same technology can be used in really horrific ways as well.
You know what I think about this generally, like, we have kids, so when we raise our kids, like, we read at least I read a lot, and the main idea here was that you need to leave your kids free, but you need to put limits for them, because otherwise they don't know what they are going to do, and like they may choose the wrong path and may have more problems in the future if you don't put these small limits in there. So like, and when I see this in terms of AI, I do think it's the same thing, that you need to put limits on these kind of developments. Otherwise, like, it will go out of hand, and the technology it would be difficult to take control of this kind of technology later, not just in the civilian aspect, but as you mentioned, Professor, in the military aspect, which will bring like I don't know, like great disasters for the humanity if there are no limits put soon enough for this new technology.
I think this is where maybe this is the very crisis management brain of mine switching in now. When there's a problem, I just see opportunity, and I think the fact that we're having this conversation also shows the opportunities there are in this space. Yes, there should be limits, but then, you know, also when you restrict something, people get innovative or creative and find other ways to explore. So I've realized that that's not often the solution or the remedy, but to engage. When I have been consulted on this AI thing, what I've advised is that we do need to engage more with the people who own this technology, who design and who develop this technology, because we cannot regulate, not restrict, regulate what we don't understand and know. I am part of what is called Accelerated Capability Environment in the UK, where we solve safety and security challenges arising from rapidly changing digital and data technologies. And we bring experts together, particularly researchers like myself, who also understand the industry, security sector, law enforcement, military, and all what have you. And we look at the functionality and the capability of each of these emerging technologies. And it's not just AI we've worked on. We've worked on other emerging technologies from deepfake and what have you. And we try to do things like strategic foresight and model scenarios up all to 10 years, 20 years, because some of us are in that strategic space to look at what are the pitfalls and some of the things that the capabilities of this thing and how we might regulate it and how sectors might regulate it. And the basic example I always provide is the fact that, yes, when you understand what technology can do and its benefits, good, but you also know what it can do, you regulate it. So I give an example of WhatsApp, for example. WhatsApp is mostly in a lot of countries, but the way the function in countries differ. You can call with it when you are in US and most of parts of Europe, but in UAE, once you step into that country, you cannot call with WhatsApp. You can still text. It's the same WhatsApp. You never know until you try to call and the call doesn't work. And so this is what I mean by, yes, the technology is there, but we can regulate it such that it does what it needs to do in the context and in the environment which is designed to do it. And you don't have the license or the permission to design it to do certain things within the context in which is not required. We know people will still get creative. People can make a bomb out of a laptop or something and program it, but those are exceptions rather than a norm. But it's right now because a lot of people don't understand what this is all about. They can't engage, they can't advise where it is required, they can't engage with policy. I am always on the first front talking to policy, matching to government and saying, yes, let's have this conversation. Or this is what my research says. Or this is what we can do. And look at, especially security and defense, for example, research community there, I sit on it and say, okay, let's look at how this can be used and to what extent, how might this help us or harm us in terms of international security and national security? How might this enhance things? Who you should be having conversation with at what international level? It's an ongoing process, but I think what I always encourage is academia like ourselves, researchers like ourselves, people who understand how you can explain the consequences of this through empirical findings or through evidence-based scenarios to engage more with the regulators, with the governments who can put policy in place, because truly they cannot regulate what they don't know. And what I'm seeing is that most people in Department of Homeland Security, Defense, everywhere that I've gone to, Australia, New Zealand, UK, now ramping around EU, the people in there don't know. So I think we have opportunity to engage. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but yeah, but it is an opportunity to engage, to help increase understanding around this domain, because we all need it.
Yeah, exactly. Especially taking into consideration that it's still under development, it makes all of this even more difficult, because like as soon as we reach to a conclusion or it's at an understanding, at least like the other day, everything may change in just a few seconds, and so we have to start again from zero. And this is what complicates the issue even more. Professor Chandler, anything that you want to add? No.
Great spot to come to a conclusion. Those are comments. It's been a real pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. Please come see me when you're in DC next.
Professor Fakwede, your microphone. Yeah.
Be careful what you wish for. I will come. I'm planning to be in US for like a month in January. I'm going to be.
We'll come have you. Come, yeah. Get in touch. Please send her my email. So
yeah, I will come. I'll come. I do have to get around Chicago, Utah, Michigan, New York. So it's a ticket tour round, giving talk and all that, but also catching up with friends and family. But yes, definitely, I'd love to.
Okay, then I need to finalize our panel as well. It was like very great to be with all of three of you here, and it was very not just bring a lot of knowledge and information, but just a friendly panel, which I really appreciate from all of you. And I hope we'll have such cooperations in the future. Once again, thank you very much for your commentaries in this issue of Inside Turkey, which I really believe made this issue very special. And I invite everybody to have a look at this special issue. We look forward to future cooperations with the journal, but also between each other. As I see, I made possible a new friendship today, I see, between Professor Chandler and Farquhar. So I'm very glad for that as well. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you for being with us here today.
Thank you for having us.